Hey there. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. Hope that you're having a fantastic day today. My name is Cyreta Laws-Frumau. I am a performance and mindset coach with the Proctor Gallagher Institute. And for the month of July, I have been going through the book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It is a classic. Has sold over 15 million copies worldwide, so an international bestseller. And this book inspires us to go after our desire to manifest money. There are 13 success principles in this book. We're now at chapter 14, which is the 13th principle. It's called the sixth sense. My mentor, Bob Proctor, he read this book for majority of his life. He started reading it in his early 20s, well, mid 20s, and until his passing earlier this year in February, he was also reading this book. If you are looking to manifest money, this is a great book. And of course, money is not everything, it is not all, but through money or with money, we're able to influence our lives and the lives of others. Bob used this book not only to improve his wealth, but also his health and his happiness because of the impact he was able to create. So my desire, my hope is that you will use the principles in this book and also to improve your lives and the lives of those around you. This is the final step towards riches. The sixth sense, Napoleon calls it the door to the temple of wisdom. And I love that title. It's really good. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about what the sixth sense is. And we are going to talk about hero worship, like how do we use the sixth sense in a way that we tap into the expertise of others. And then finally, let me just go to this chapter right here. Sorry, I was actually preparing for a meeting and I stopped just to jump on so that we could finish our chapter today. This chapter, right, is pretty interesting. Yeah, and then finally I'm going to talk about this method that Napoleon used to actually to how you really use this sixth sense. The method that he used, for most of it, you're going to be reading, but I'm going to pick out some points that I thought was pretty interesting. Okay, so the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. Napoleon calls this the apex to the philosophy. And he said that if we understand and master the other 12 principles, then we will understand just what the sixth sense is, how it works, and we will, I want to say again, understand the power of it. I know this chapter might seem a little strange to some persons. I've heard persons say this chapter is a bit strange. However, if you would have already been doing the exercises and really look at the other chapters and how it's been building up to this chapter, you would understand that this chapter actually ties in really, really well with the other principles, okay? So the sixth sense is also referred to as the creative imagination. And we spoke about the creative imagination in chapter 6. And we said the creative imagination is how we link the finite mind of man with infinite intelligence, with the unseen, with the source, with God, with the God source that is within, with the all-knowing, all-powerful. So it shouldn't be that strange. And then Napoleon says that ideas or thoughts, and we mentioned this as well with imagination, flashes through the mind, through hunches and inspirations. We're like, oh, I have an idea, and we wonder where we got that idea from. And we think, I don't know what we think, like, where does it come from? I don't think we really understand where it comes from and why we get these hunches and inspiration. But I have had experiences where these hunches and inspiration has actually allowed me to tap into opportunities and also saved me from a bad situation. And I know you can definitely relate to this. And this is what Napoleon is talking about in this chapter. For a large part, how it helped him to, through inspiration, to tap into other opportunities. So let's discuss. He says also that understanding comes through mental and spiritual development. And for this point, I want to emphasize that if you think that you're only physical and that the things that are physical, the things that are temporal, the things that you can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch are the only things that exist, then you're limiting yourself to the power and the possibilities that could be yours. And until you develop that mental and that spiritual side of you, you will not understand your full power or the power that is flowing in and through you. You will not understand or come close to understanding or open your mind to the God source. The mind of man is connected to infinite intelligence. This infinite intelligence, really, we sometimes seem very, seems like we don't have any power because infinite intelligence, we really don't understand what it is, but we do have a little bit of power and we can communicate to infinite intelligence. And we also spoke about in the last chapter, the power of prayer and how when we go in prayer with the things that are consistent, whether it's negative or positive, it always manifests itself in our lives. So we do know that we can influence to some extent the things that we bring into our lives and influence infinite intelligence. Of course, this is just based on my own experience. And also I see from this chapter how Napoleon is also talking and bringing his own experience similar to what I have also experienced and you would probably have experienced as well. So, and he says also in this chapter that he has been notified of opportunities. He has been warned about danger. And you will only know once you practice these principles. Only when you open your mind. An open mind will learn new things. A closed mind can never learn new things, can never experience new things. So open your mind and you will see what is there for you. All right. So it does encourage us to experiment and experience this knowledge. Okay, hero worship. I want to mention hero worship here because we're going to go into his method, something that he experimented with. Because hero worship, he talks about how he would, look up to other men, and admire them. But instead of worshiping them, it's very important that we emulate. So we emulate the great, the people in our society, in our lives that are doing well through feelings of action. And I can relate to that in that I really emulate and admire Bob Proctor. I see him as a great teacher. I love to teach. I love to inspire. I love to influence other people to live their best lives. Before living your best life was a thing. Nothing gives me greater. I mean, that thing definitely gives me a great feeling inside. And for Bob, it was as well. There are other people that I admire as well. My parents, how persistent, how tenacious they were. So there are people in your lives that you admire. And the best way to admire them is not through worship, but through emulation. You pick from them the trait or characteristics that you like or that you admire, and you act on that. You use it to improve yourself. So Napoleon method of having a council of invisible. So he had an invisible council, and this is found on page 315. So he had an imaginary council, and he called them his cabinet members. And this is how he was able to tap into the sixth sense, because he was using his imagination. I would encourage you to read it. It's something that is very interesting for you to read, because here he's saying that you can build character through autosuggestion. We spoke about autosuggestion. We spoke about autosuggestion in chapter 4. So on page 315 of my book to 320, it's a really good part of it, to about 324, you can read about the council meetings. I did highlight a few things. So now we're going to talk about the meetings. He said, so what he would do is, as he fell asleep, he would, with his imagination, imagine that he was having meetings with these men that he admired, and they would be sitting around. So the men, there were 9 men: Emerson, Paine, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Burbank, Napoleon, Ford, and Carnegie. And every night for several years, he would hold meetings with his invisible counselors. The meetings became so realistic that he became fearful of their consequences, because it's like, even though the members of his council were imaginary, I mean, some were dead at the time, some were still alive, but it's not that they were having a real meeting. It was only in his imagination. I think he became a little bit fearful. He says on page 320, these meetings became so realistic that I became fearful of their consequences, and discontinued them for several months. The experiences were so uncanny that I was afraid if I continued them, I would lose sight of the fact that the meetings were purely experiences of my imagination. So that's how real they became. As I read this, I thought about how, as children, how we have this active imagination and how we used it to dream a lot. Like, I would have so many interesting dreams. As you know, when I was a child, I remember I started writing my stories when I was 9 years old because my imagination was so active. It led me to start writing. And I still have that book. It's at my mom's. So, but I would write stories. I would dream of fantasy lands. I would dream a lot about the stars because I wanted to be an astronaut. So we can imagine this. Don't think because we're older now and because we have become so, the reality of the world has taken over so much that we can't dream just for a few minutes a day. So on page 322, he says, during these meetings with the invisible counselors, I find my mind more receptive to ideas, thoughts, and knowledge, which would reach me through the sixth sense. So here are some of the things that came out of his meetings. He gives full credit for the ideas, for the thoughts, and the knowledge that he received through inspiration. Because also when he was having these meetings, he would say to each of the counselors, I have you here for this reason. This is the characteristics, characteristic that I admire, characteristics that I admire about you. And it miraculously guided him past these difficulties. So whatever difficulties, whenever his life was in jeopardy, he was miraculously guided past difficulties that he experienced. He states, though, that his original purpose was to impress his own subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion. So that was his original purpose, but it helped him, way more than he bargained for. Of course, you would recognize that this chapter covers a subject that majority of persons are not familiar with. The sixth sense, I'm on page 323, is a subject that will be of great interest and benefit to the person whose aim is to accumulate vast wealth, but it need not claim the attention of those whose desire are more modest. So if you have a small goal, if your goal is not huge, then you're not gonna go out of your way to do these things. You're gonna settle for something small, because why go through all that trouble? I've heard people say, why go through all that trouble? So your goal has to be big. The sixth sense is not something that one can take off and put on at will, of course, because you cannot command infinite intelligence. You can't command God. We don't know who or what God is. We can understand only to a certain extent, right? So it's not like we can turn on and turn off as we will it to be, the sixth sense. Ability to use this great power comes slowly and through the application of other principles outlined in this book. So mastering the other 12 principles is key. So emphasis on that again. And then he says this, and I was like, wow, because now comes something that I think is interesting, because he mentions age again. He says that more often the knowledge is not available until one is well past the age of 50. So it's not time for us. I don't know if anyone is watching this video. If you are 50 or over the age of 50, you have to start applying these principles. Okay, so with this, the sixth sense, and the reason for this is that the spiritual forces with which the sixth sense is closely related do not mature or become stable except through the years of meditation, self-examination, and serious thought. So yes, there is an age that he attached to it, but there is something also even more interesting. He says years of meditation, self-examination, and serious thought. So I would say it doesn't really limit us to our age, because I've always been told that I've been a very mature spirit, a very mature individual all my life. So, and it might be the same for you as well. Like, you can develop these things once you start applying seriously the other 12 principles, and then this will come. The starting point. So now that we're at the 13th step, remember that the starting point for all achievement was or is desire. And we mentioned that in chapter 2, desire, the first step towards riches. The finishing point is understanding of self, understanding of others, and understanding the laws of nature, recognition and understanding of happiness. Eventually, you will find yourself in possession of a power that will enable you to throw off discouragement, master fear, overcome procrastination, and draw freely upon your imagination. The moving spirit of every truly great thinker, leader, artist, musician, writer, and statesman will understand this chapter very well. So once you get to that point, it's almost as if you become unstoppable, fearless, because you understand so much, not only yourself, not only others, but universal laws. You understand the laws of your being. You understand exactly who you are, how spiritual you are, how connected you are. So that's it for the sixth sense. We are going to move into chapter 15, which is the final chapter, but actually a very, very important chapter, because a lot of these principles that we have discussed, I think a lot of times we don't move towards a big goal, or we don't want to experiment with any of these things because we're afraid. And so the next chapter is going to talk about that. You know, we can either have an open mind, have faith, which is one of the strongest positive emotions and feelings that we can have, or we can live our life in fear. And let's not do that, the fear part of it. Let's really understand who we are, why we're here, the main reason for us being here, and how we can truly live an abundant and full life. So that's it for chapter 14, the sixth sense. I will catch you in my next video. We're going to wrap up this book. We're going to go into chapter 15, like I said, with the 6 greatest fears. We're going to overcome them, and we're going to move into purpose. Chapter 15 is a longer chapter as well, so that will take us a few days, but we're gonna have fun nonetheless. And I will be having, one last thing before I go. So I have an upcoming masterclass. It's gonna be on the 1st of August. So I'm telling you now so that you can prepare. We're gonna tie all of this up so that you understand and put this in a neat package. We're going to tie everything up over a 3-day period in a powerful masterclass. Until my next video, take care.